Welcome back in. Trey Lowell here with Lowell Productions, and it seems like every time I talk about the Panasonic GH5 on this channel, you guys enjoy it. Now, in particular, over the past several months, I've received a few comments in regards to, we'd love to know what frame rates, what resolutions you're kind of using in your video production. So I figured we'd go ahead and take full advantage of our roughly 4 quick settings that we could have here with the Panasonic GH5. I'll give you my insight into my quick 1, 2, 3, 4 that I use, whether it be on weddings or any kind of film production. So if that's something that you're interested in, stick around. So whether you're new to the Panasonic GH5 or you've been shooting on it for a while, let's go ahead and jump into my video settings that I think will really kind of speed up your workflow. So now that we actually have the camera on, we're going to start with C1 being my first go-to profile in regards to these 4 that we're going to cover. Now for my C1 profile, we'll go ahead. I'm going to be shooting 4K 10-bit 24 frames per second, 150 megapixels, bytes per second, you name it. Not trying to get too fancy here. Now, reason being that I have that as my C1 is really just going to be, this is my go-to for true recording beautiful footage. Now, what do I mean by that? 24 frames per second, which is going to be very authentic. It's going to be great for documenting. It's going to be great for weddings. Overall, this is going to be the most natural looking profile kind of shoot or setup that I'm going to actually go to when video shooting. So my C1, like I said, is 4K 10-bit, 24 frames per second at that 150 megabits per second. And also, I'll give you guys a little bit of understanding in regards to this. As far as my stabilization settings go, we will go into our menu here. It's going to be camera, number 2, page 3, stabilization. And when it comes to the operation mode, I have the little on or the handshake, whatever, hand emoji. And then as far as stabilization goes, I have it activated for this 20 frames per second or 24 frames per second. And as we make our way from C1 into my C2, this is going to be more catered towards slow motion. In particular, it's going to be 120 frames per second, 1080p, 8-bit. Now that's going to be, as far as resolution goes, it's going to be the lowest resolution that we're going to be using, but the highest frame rate. So you're giving up a little bit of resolution for those higher frame rates. I really just use this in particular if I just know there's going to be something that I absolutely need to capture. 120 frames per second, rocketing, rolling. You're going to need a lot of light, but you're going to be able to capture whatever you need at that 120 frames per second. This then rolls me into profile C3. Now, can you take a guess what it might be? Okay, so this is going to be a little bit of a hybrid. This is going to be shooting 60 frames per second, slow motion. So 4K 60, not what many of you guys are thinking actually, but we're shooting 4K 8-bit at 150 megapixels per second, and then we're also shooting at that 60 frames per second slow motion. Now, some of you might be confused. Panasonic GH5 and their variable frame rate is going to give you the option of anywhere from, 24 upwards to 60 at that 4K resolution. And I also sometimes like to use the 4K 48 frames per second. But for this particular one, like I said, we're at that 4K 8-bit, 100 megapixels per second, 24p as far as our timeline, but shooting at 60 frames per second. So it's going to come out of the camera, slow motion, 60 frames per second. And I find that to really give beautiful 4K footage at that slow motion, and you can even speed it up if you need it to be a little bit more authentic, but it's a hybrid between the 120 frames and obviously the 24 frames per second, and that's going to be our C3 profile. Now, last but not least, we're going to actually just go all the way back to our video mode. Now, this one is already being preset, and I kind of just leave it here, but I will show you guys. Now, this is 4K, 8-bit, 60 frames per second, true 60 frames. Now, this is something that is kind of one of those things that gets tricky, but a lot of people like to shoot 4K 60, so this is not slow motion. This is true 60 frames per second. So in regards to motion blur and things like that, it's kind of a little interesting to get used to on the front end. A lot of people love to use this frame rate in regards to shooting, putting it in a 24 frames per second timeline and then slowing it down. So if you ever hear someone say 4K 60 and then I'm going to take it and put it in a timeline and slow it down to get slow motion, that is exactly what we're doing here. Now, as far as the footage goes, it looks absolutely beautiful, but it's a little bit different on the eye. So this is something that I kind of dabble with from time to time, but I went ahead and I always have it set in my kind of go-to just movie mode or video mode. That's right there. Now, if some of you are wondering, why in the world are you flipping back and forth? I always just stay in the video mode and I change it. To me, this is just a quick go-to, I guess, hot swap option between all of these video settings. Boom, 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 boom. Now, obviously, some people are already used to the C1, C2, C3. You can even go deeper into your profile settings and do a C3-2, C3-3. But these are just my quick boom, boom, boom with a twist. We are jumping from settings to settings. Those are kind of my 4 go-to settings that I juggle. I recently shot a wedding last weekend and that was kind of my go-to. Jumping between those because it's going to give me the ability to look natural. It's going to be the ability to do slow-mo. And it also gives me the ability to do the hybrid, the 60 frames per second, where I know that it's going to be pleasing and it's going to have that natural look, but then I can also slow it down as well. So quick, easy kind of go-to settings for the Panasonic GH5. If you're interested in more of kind of my particular settings for my GH5 or my GH4, drop a comment in the comment section below. So like I said, if you found this useful, go ahead and hit that like button. If you like the content I keep creating on this channel, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. And hey guys, I will see you in the next video. And yeah, what did you think of this? We've got the above, we've got the GoPro angle, and then talking to camera using the old faithful Canon 5D Mark III. Yeah, 5D Mark III. And I got the Panasonic GH4 up top right here on rail. And then the beautiful camera actually just letting you guys see raw look.